Okay, go through DSS document.
We can set environment specific values from environment to environment.
Specific values using DSS. Thank you. Okay, so for that we don't have multiple environments here to work on, but you can take any other example and you can implement if you wish to implement. I told you one example, right? You have a link. In the link, last two parameters will change. That you need to dynamically pass. Means you need to frame the link. Let's say in a data transform, you have a property dot URL is equal to that link. You need to set in the link control. You need to mention the property. But last two parameter, how do you change it dynamically from development to UAT to QA to production? You create last two parameters as DSS and then frame that property value reading it from DSS. Okay, and then do what? Next, after you move this code from development to QA, what are the changes you need to make? You open those two DSS, change the values. Changing the value in DSS, do you need to make any changes in the program?
No.
Any changes required in the program? No, because you are just reading it. Okay, I will show you how to use it. Otherwise, for the URL part, I will show you. Working with dynamic system settings, you don't need to write anything. So let's try to create a DSS with endpoint. Here I don't have multiple servers, so I'm taking the same endpoint URL and dynamically pass this to SOAP connector. This is what I'm going to do. Okay, because I have to show you practically, that's what I'm doing. 594. September 14. Okay, so you are going to do this, creating DSS in organization rule set. I'm going to do that. Mostly 99.99% or 100% you will always create DSS in organization rule set generally. Right click on this. Okay, before that, go to records tab, recents, connect SOAP rule. This one. What is the endpoint URL? I'm taking the same URL because I don't have multiple servers. Okay, take endpoint URL from connect SOAP. So service SOAP, anyway you can take. Anyhow, this will be given to you by service providers. You don't need to worry about taking this. Okay, now create DSS. Here you go. Let me close this. Right click on this, create sysadmin category, dynamic system settings. Okay, what is the name of this DSS? Endpoint URL, something like this I have mentioned. EP means endpoint URL, owning rule set. It will not show up in the drop down. You have to manually type it. LIC setting purpose means name of the URL, endpoint URL. Okay, name of the DSS, sorry. So name of the DSS, see, there is one problem that the rule set what you are giving, it will not take here. Okay, you need to change this rule set. Click on rule set editing. Click on edit at the rule set and change it. So what is the rule set I want? I don't know why they have designed like this, but this is not the right one.
Organization.
LIC. It is not yet been created. After you click on save, you change it, then there won't be any usage. Okay, save this and paste it here. Add the URL here. Save, done. Now where is the endpoint URL of the service that you are trying to invoke? It is there in DSS. Just imagine this is different from what is there in the connector. If you imagine like that, you will be able to better understand. Okay, now open the activity. Now open the activity which has connector rule, being called. Okay, where is the activity? So this is the connect soap, right? This connect soap rule is being called from an activity. How do I find out that? View references. Sometimes view references will not show up for post processing activities, all that. Okay, declarative rules activities and all, view references doesn't work out. How do you find out then? Only by going through tracer. Okay, so this is the activity. Check out this params tab. You go to parameters tab. You still get loaded. This is a parameters tab. I am defining here URL. Okay, one parameter I am defining URL, and then steps tab. Step 2. Here is the place where I am setting the input request. Here I'm going to set, what is that? Param.url is equal to I want to read the value of the URL that is there, that URL value that is there in DSS. How do I do this? Expression builder. What should I do? Expression builder. In the expression builder, browse. What is the function? Get data system setting with 2 parameters. I'll take get data system setting. First one rule set, second one setting purpose. Setting purpose means name of the DSS. Rule set is LIC, comma. What is the name of the DSS? EP URL. That is what I have given. Exactly, you have to manually type. So now the DSS that you have created with name EP URL of the rule set LIC, that value will be retrieved to this particular place. Retrieved and assigned to this particular parameter. Now take this parameter and expand this connect, so pass the URL. Save, done. Create a case and test it. It should function the same way as it was before. How it was functioning before, it should be functioning the same way. So previous to this one, what is the change? I am just passing the URL. See, now URL is being passed at the calling time, plus connector rule also has URL. Imagine the URL in connector rule is different, and this URL which you are passing is different. Which one will take priority? Which one out of these two will take priority?
This one, DSS one.
It's not about DSS. It is about the URL which you are passing here. So connector rule, definitely that is mandatory field. So if you are going to create your connector in development environment, in all the environments, the URL that will be there in connector rule will be same. But the URL that you pass at the time of calling is different. So the URL that you are passing will be taken priority. What was the screen where we have called? A screen lo call chesam. I think it is vehicle information, right? Personal vehicle information. Transaction details screen submit. And what is that? Personal vehicle information screen. This is some test screen, I think. Okay. This is the place where we have called it. What are the values? Do you remember? Win001. Is that the same? So when I click on this, it will have to retrieve the information and place here. So this time the URL of the endpoint URL of the service is being passed by connector. from the DSS. It is functioning as it is, means there is no issue passing from DSS. We did not make any mistake. Okay, so this is about this is about DSS and its usage. You can even work on some other requirement. Just give me a minute. Okay, as simple as a practice, you can do this. Okay, I'll tell you. I'll just think about it and tell you. A meaningful requirement, I'll tell you. Model manufacturing year. Okay. So next topic that we are going to work on after DSS, what is that? File listener. Next topic, services. We worked on SOAP service. We worked on REST service connector, REST connector, SOAP connector, all this. Okay. And next we are going to work on, this is not showing, I'll see. And next we are going to work on this one. What is that? Service file related service, or you can even work on external database integration also. Anything is okay. Okay, let's work on services. Anyhow, we are with web services, right? We will work on web services concept continuation. In the continuation of web services, we are going to discuss the next service is file service. What is the next service? File service. In case of SOAP service, the data structure is XML. In case of REST service that we have implemented, the data structure is JSON. In case of file service, what would be the data? What would be the data in case of files? File data, that is file itself. In case of file service, data input will be file. So in case of SOAP, the input request is XML. In case of REST, input request that we have used is JSON. In case of file, the input request is going to be file. Okay, file can be any type, but 99.99% that specific type of file that is going to be used is CSV file. What is the file type? I mean, like extension of the file, .csv. You have .xl, .csv. Did we work on Excel file? We already worked on uploading Excel document, reading the data from the file, assigning it to clipboard, all that we have implemented by calling an OOTB activity, px parse Excel file. Okay, now this is the turn of CSV file. Okay, this is the most widely being used files in the enterprise application development with an extension of CSV. So how does a CSV file looks like? Let me show you first of all. Okay, look at here. This is a CSV file. I'm going to open with Notepad. Just you can open even with Excel editor. Okay, so this is how it looks like when you open with Notepad. Customer ID, first name, last name, gender, all of these have the data. If you look at this, this is a table, okay, where you have customer ID column, first name, last name. The first row is header, remaining rows are data. How each attribute can be identified here by a separator called comma, up to comma one attribute. How does system understands? You know that this is one attribute, this is another attribute, this is another attribute, means property. But how does system knows this is a property and this is one property value, this is second property, this is third, and all? That is going to be understandable to system by using comma. Comma is called here as delimiter. What do you call it? Delimiter. This file is called CSV file, that is comma separated CSV file. Comma delimited. You can say this is comma delimited CSV file. What does it mean? A CSV file which has commas for each property and each property value. Okay, so if I open this in Excel editor directly, it looks like a normal Excel. Okay, this is header field and these are data. At the time of reading the data from this file and processing, do you need to process the header field? Processing. I want to read the data of this file and store into a table. Do I have to read the first record and store it into table? First record, you don't need to store. First record is just a header for understanding. You need to ignore processing the first record. Remaining records you have to process. Okay. So processing can be done entire file data at a time. At a time, system can read entire file data and process it. If it is reading at a time entire file data, what will be the clipboard structure? Single value property, page property, page list property. Which one? Page list. You know that it is a table, correct? If I am going to read row by row, one row I will read and process. Second row will be read, processed. Third row will be read and processed. If this is going to be done, each time when you are reading and processing, what will be the clipboard structure of data? Single value, page, page list.
Page.
It is going to be page. Clear, right? So this is the CSV file which we wanted to process. Okay. So this file will be given as an input to the service file. Service file rule takes this file as an input. Everyone clear? Then what are the tasks that service file has to do? To whom you are going to give the CSV file? There is a rule called service file. See, XML, in case of SOAP service, XML data you are going to give it. Whom you are going to give it to? Service SOAP. In case of REST service, you are going to give JSON request. To whom you are going to give it? REST service. In case of service file, you are going to give the file to service file rule. Service file rule receives file. Let's say in our case it is CSV file. Then what are the different tasks that service file rule has to do? Okay, so service file rule has to open the file. First it has to open the file, read the content, parse it to clipboard. Means take the content from the file. Parsing to clipboard means assign it onto clipboard, process it by an activity, and finally give this file back to someone called file listener. Okay, I'll explain about this now. See, service file rule is going to receive the file. Okay, now in comparison with SOAP or REST, anything, how does a request will be sent to the SOAP service? From where the request is going to come? Request. Who will be sending the request for the SOAP? How a SOAP service in your system will be invoked? Through?
Consumer will send and through XML.
I'm not asking about the request structure. You have a service created, right? Service execution will begin, right? If service execution is begin means it should have to receive a request. From where it is going to receive the request? From third party system. Third party system will send a request directly to your system where you have service by using endpoint URL and all. What about files? In case of files, the files will not be sent over the web. Files will be placed on hard disk. Where it will be placed? This can be local system, this can be remote hard disk. Remote means FTP, local means normally it will be available on the same machine. Okay, so file will be placed in a hard disk. Hard disk means on a hard disk you have a folder, inside the folder the moment file is placed in the hard disk folder path, the file will be picked and processed. Who will pick the file? How does the PRPC knows file is placed or not placed? Means on the hard disk folder path there will be some path. Let's say hard disk C drive, some path is there. C drive, in that PRPC customer files. In that folder, you will be actual files will be placed. Somehow the business is going to place it. By FTP, business will place it. You don't need to worry about how to do it because that is not our task. After placing the file is our task. Okay, file will be placed by business by using some systems in an FTP manner, and on hard disk folder path, file is being placed. See, at what moment the file will be placed? We don't know about it. We cannot guess at what moment the file can be landing onto this folder path anytime. Then there should be a continuous monitoring required. What is being required? Continuous monitoring on this path is required. Okay, so this can be done by using file listener. Another rule. What is that rule? file listener is going to point to folder path and monitors it. Okay, there is one rule called one additional rule. This rule was not there in SOAP and REST because those are services. This is service plus listener. Here we are learning service plus listener. Now listener is the one which is going to monitor a folder path and for the input files. The moment input file lands, okay, when an input file lands, when file is placed on folder path, listener picks the file and then do what? Hand over the file to whom? Service file. Listener is going to pick the file and then hand over the file to service file rule. Now service file rule is going to start its tasks. So who is first here? Listener is first. Listener A is going to continuously run on the system, PRPC system. Okay, PRPC system, if you have listener created, listener will keep on running. It will keep on monitor the respect to it. When you create it, you will create it pointing to some folder path. It will watch that folder path continuously. When a file is being placed, file will be picked by listener and listener will hand over the file to service file rule. Now service file rule, once it receives the file from the listener, then it is going to open the file, read the content, parse it, execute activity for processing purpose. Once processing is done, it will hand over the file back to listener. Now listener is going to have the control on the file. Now listener deletes the file, deletes the processed file from source folder and moves it to completed folder. This is what going to be done. Listener at the beginning and then service and again finally listener. Listener, service, listener. You created listener. Listener should continuously run on the server, correct? So in order for the listener to run on the server, you need to configure the listener on the node by using admin studio. You have to go to admin studio. In the admin studio, you have to go to resources, listeners, and where is that listeners loaded on? And here the listener that you have created, you need to start that listener. How do you start the listener? It is not coming because there are no listeners. If I create one, it will come here. Once you select the listener and click on apply, it will start running. There are no listeners as of now. Okay, so we are going to work on this file service where we are going to see how to create listener, how to point a listener to a folder path on your system, and how to create service file plus parse rule. Here it is parse delimited rule. What is the delimiter character? Comma. Delimiter character is comma. File type is CSV. Okay, we process record by record and then we are going to ignore first record, that is mandatory processing. Okay, and we will be creating activity for processing purpose. Write down business requirement, you'll understand. I'll show you step by step how to create.